Welcome to Bianchi Law Talk every Sunday on Facebook Live at 5 o'clock. So the topic that I chose for today were based upon a number of media hits that I did with national media outlets this week, as well as some questions that people have been asking me, and they really involve two cases. The first one is the Alabama mall shooting with E.J. Bradford, who was a young man who was shot and killed by a police officer in the mall. And the other one is the Caneiro case out of Colts Neck, New Jersey, and the terrible tragedy that occurred with regard to one brother allegedly killing another brother, that brother's wife, his sister-in-law, as well as their three children, and then lighting the house on fire after shooting and or stabbing those individuals. And they were business partners together. So why am I connecting these two cases? Well, let me start with E.J. Bradford, the Alabama mall shooting. He's a black male who is in lawful possession of a weapon. There was a shooting at the mall. Officers responded to that shooting, saw Bradford allegedly with a gun, and shot and killed Bradford. Now, here's where things get squirrely in that case, and it's a constant problem that I have with regard to how cases are being handled, especially in the media in multiple jurisdictions. And I know firsthand experience because I did all the media for murder cases for 6 years as the Morris County prosecutor. Originally, the media came out and indicated that Bradford was the actual perpetrator of the shooting in the mall, and that's why the police shot him. Then they had to walk that statement back when it became clear that Bradford was not the initial shooter in the case and indicated that he was, quote unquote, brandishing a gun, and that's why the officer shot him. Then, in what can only be described as peculiar, odd, and weird, they checked a dictionary on the word brandishing and indicated, well, he wasn't really brandishing the gun at or towards anybody, but rather had a gun. And that's why he was shot by the police. Well, here we go again with another case with a minority. Recently, there was a security guard who was trying to break up a fight, again in lawful possession of a weapon, who was shot and killed at the hands of the police. So when you get that kind of case, and we had one in Morris County in particular that I broke down with Chief Chris Wagner from Denville on the Law and Crime Network, where I host. You can actually go to my YouTube channel and see that interview. It was fascinating, and Chief Wagner did a great job. There are certain do's and certain don'ts. And the first thing that just don't get is why police officers that are investigating their own department aren't immediately having that investigation taken over by an independent law enforcement agency like we would do in Morris County. You take it immediately out of the hands of the police department. You tell them to get behind the crime scene tapes. They can have nothing to do with the investigation, including any significant investigatory information. And the other thing that is very important in those cases, and I did it, it's pretty much followed in New Jersey, is that the prosecutor is the only person that is giving data to the media. There's a huge reason for this, and Alabama mall shooting shows it. You don't want to be walking back information because it leads to even greater tension in a community that's on edge already with innocent civilians who are being shot and killed by the police. Now, before anybody starts telling me in commentary, whatever, I'm a police supporter. Most police do an excellent job. Most never shoot their firearms. But you have to know that when that happens, there's going to be a general concern, especially from the minority community, that this is being done correctly, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and that it's a fair and independent investigation. So one, having your own agency handle that investigation to me is a big no-no. Why it continues to go on, only God knows, because it makes it harder and harder for the department moving forward. Secondly, only the prosecutor should release data. Now, why is that? Well, because the prosecutor is under the ethics rules as to what can and cannot be released to the media, and they are in charge of all of law enforcement. And actually, at every point in time that there's a police shooting, it becomes a legal matter, a grand jury matter, which the prosecutor is in control. So the prosecutor, when I did it, I'd have to give basic information about what occurred and maybe who was involved. But after that, I locked it down because I did not want to make any statements or give any information that could affect the investigation, affect witnesses' testimony, and more importantly, could be wrong. So the Alabama mall shooting basically is an example of exactly how not to do it. And there have been many cases before like this, and how this is not addressed unilaterally across the country is shocking to me. Now, the other reason people will say, well, you're just doing that because of, political reasons or whatever. No, quite to the contrary, you're doing that to protect the investigation. How many times I've investigated cases where witnesses started giving answers to questions, and when you ask them, how could you possibly know that? Ultimately, they tell you, I read it in the newspaper. I heard it on a TV account. I'm really not sure what it was I saw versus what it was that I was told. That's the reason why you don't do it. Another reason is, if you get the perpetrator or suspects in a crime, you don't want to have fed data in the media so that when they're giving you an interview and they say things that only law enforcement could possibly know because it's not in the public arena, that helps prosecutors prove their case. So police should not be involved in this, but they can't help themselves sometimes. And then walking statements back, which essentially made Bradford look like he was a bad guy, and having to walk it back twice obviously has caused a huge problem in the case. The case I want to talk to you about is this Paul Caneiro case out of Colts Neck, New Jersey. It's a brutal murder case. Essentially, they were brothers. They were in a business together. From what we're hearing, limited data the prosecutor's giving us. Watch how it's different here. Law enforcement isn't talking about it. The prosecutor's talking about it. And the prosecutor, Gramacioni is his name, is being very, very careful not to poison jury pools, not to affect the investigation, give the basic details to the public, but not give any investigative data out. But what we know about that case is that Paul Caneiro was charged with an arson of his own home, and his wife and kids were inside the house, and he saved them, or they got out successfully. And then hours later, the home of his brother was set ablaze from gasoline and fluids, accelerants rather, put in the basement that burned the house down. But they found out, and Prosecutor Gramacioni kept mentioning, there was acts of homicidal violence before the fire. Okay, so in other words, there was a shooting of his brother, as well as stabbing and shooting of the wife and the children. Pretty brutal stuff. And the initial motive for this is that there was a financial dispute because the business was having some level of difficulty. Yeah, you would think to yourself, who would go and do such things? Man, we've talked about this before. These crimes, these murders are getting more senseless, more violent, and they're bringing in innocent kids that have nothing to do with it. Just think about the Watts case and of his wife who was pregnant, and strangling and suffocating his two little baby girls and sticking them in drums of crude oil. So there's a level of savagery that's going on with this. But I had said from the beginning of that case, for those who watch my commentary, that it seems to me that what Caneiro was doing was burning his own house in order to say, hey, somebody was after both me and my brother. But quickly, prosecutors determined that that was committed by Paul Caneiro himself. And in fact, Prosecutor Gramacioni, giving a very limited news conference, indicated it was a ruse to throw investigators off about the crime he had committed with regard to killing his brother, his sister-in-law, and his nieces because of this business dispute. So this is the tale of the two cases that I'd like to talk to you about. Prosecutor Gramacioni has it locked down. He's doing a thorough, independent investigation. He's taking his time and he's going slowly. He's only giving out basic facts. Those facts, he's explaining why they're supported, where they're supported, so that there's not going to have to be a walking back like there was in the E.J. Bradford case, the Alabama mall shooting. It is so important. And when I was prosecutor, we debated this a lot because there are very specific rules about what a prosecutor can and can't say. Many of it is to protect the investigation, but a lot of it, too, is to protect innocent people like Mr. Bradford, who could be accused of doing something that, in fact, is not accurate. So let me just go one more point on the Bradford case and why it's important. Well, what do we see next? And I was really, really agitated. I was on HLN, I believe it was, when the mayor now gets up and the city council. This is exactly what you don't want. Politics involved in investigations. And they got up there and they demanded that the body cam video be released. They went through dog and pony show. Now, when I say that, don't get me wrong. I understand the community is agitated. It's upset. But this is still a criminal investigation subject to a grand jury investigation. But because of the way the cops bollocksed it up, the politicians felt the need to have to stand up in front of the microphones. Never let politicians speak in a law enforcement thing, because their job as politicians, their concerns, their interests are very different than prosecutors' interests. And prosecutors should go slow and deliberately. And we had in Denver, we knew pretty much what the facts of that case are very quickly from the body cam video. But we were not going to jump to conclusions until we dotted I's, crossed T's, and that took 2 or 3 months for us to have it locked up, ready to go, and go in front of the public, do a press conference in which we received great accolades for the thoroughness of our investigation. But the difference there was when I left, the first were the community leaders that we had already established a relationship with. And while many made fun of our community affairs outreach, it was key to be law enforcement partners with them because they provided us law enforcement data. And then when there was something where law enforcement's credibility could be on the line, they trusted because they knew us, that we would try to do the right thing. And then at the end, if you didn't agree with it, feel more than free and vocal to come against what it was that we did. I think that's really important. Another thing in the Bradford case that really shocks me is I believe it was up to 4 days that nobody from law enforcement even reached out and contacted the family. I mean, this is something that is essential. It's another part where you bring them in, you offer your condolences either way, whether Mr. Bradford was guilty of something or not. He's still somebody who's dead and the family is grieving. Turns out Mr. Bradford was not involved in that shooting. Nevertheless, you let them know that we're going to do an independent investigation. And the rule is this: if the cops did something wrong, they're going to be indicted. And if they didn't, we're not going to indict them and we're going to stand by them. But you have to wait for a full investigation to occur. So I'm interested in your thoughts. Do you think, like in the Michael Brown case, you can have your opinions all across the spectrum as to whether or not the shoot was a good shoot or it wasn't a good shoot, but leaving a body laying on the ground for hours uncovered, and making some of the commentary that was made, to me, was the thing that exacerbated the thing, and more than it needed to be. And what I always worried was that when we had one of these scenarios where law enforcement action was taken into question by the community, that we're going to have protests down the street with the community leaders, and maybe rightly so, and then the cops are going to feel that they have to defend themselves by having counter protests, and then it becomes everything about everything except the facts and the truth of a matter. Well, what are your thoughts? How are we handling the Alabama shooting versus how Prosecutor Gramaccioni has given limited, accurate data, explained the charges, and he is in control of the messaging, which I think is very important. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Listen, my last point that I like to say, I see that there's some people commenting here, and Mark, thanks for being here, and Michelle, and Rennie, and Mike Spinell, thank you so much. Hey, listen, I love answering questions. I love this. You can always, of course, share these videos. We greatly appreciate it, or subscribe to my YouTube channel, Law Talk, where I have all my formal media hits as well as the informal videos based upon questions people are asking me. Tomorrow, I just got done with 2 Fox News appearances over the weekend, one arguing and debating my law partner, David Bruno, and that was a lot of fun. And today with Eric Shawn on Fox News about the Mueller-Trump investigation. And tomorrow, in the 9 o'clock hour, if you have time, I'll be on MSNBC with Stephanie Rule, topic to be determined. When Dave and myself were on set with Shannon Bream, Fox News on Friday night, about 11:45 in the evening, the news broke about President George Bush dying. And I'd just like to say one thing on his behalf. I couldn't help but think, when I was listening to the background of President Bush, his military service, an airman, a fighter combat pilot, a person who had gone through bruising political campaigns, a loyalty and love for his wife and his family that's beyond belief, his presidential service, which he did with dignity and class, that it was refreshing as we were going through his presidency and his life, even up to and including jumping out of an airplane at 90 years old, the vim and the vigor, and he just really took everything he could out of life to serve other people and to be a good dad and to be a statesman as opposed to a politician. Now, I didn't agree with a lot of what President Bush's policies were at the time, but when I look back on it right now, the dignity and respectability of the office that he carried, he did so with amazement and honor and respect. And so I offer my prayers and condolences, as I know you all do, and any right-minded thinking person, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, can't help but to say that that was a life well served. So we'll be back next Sunday on Bianchi Law Talk. I hope you can follow me on my formal media hits, or subscribe to the YouTube channel as I indicated before, or share this with your friends. I really appreciate it. Have a great week, and we'll be back next week, next Sunday, 5 o'clock, with another Bianchi Law Talk. If you have any suggestions for a topic you'd like covered, feel free to let me know. Take care.